Okay, so first of all, I spent a lot of time thinking on about attendance, okay? And I think the result is that I simply give up. So from now on, you can do whatever you like, okay? I just don't want not coming to class be an excuse for not knowing what happens, okay? Beyond that, it's your business. Any complaints? Okay. I think this is the best solution. You know, I save my time, you save your time. We don't quarrel. Much less, you know, we solve the number one trouble we seem to be having. Okay. So again, sorry for the delay, but what I want to do today is talk about web views. So this is essentially how to include. Yes. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
When the server's not responding to, like, if you have a private conversation, it always returns false.
Really?
Unless you're in the private conversation, it's returning false.
Is it true? Do people notice this? It should be the case. I mean, somebody yesterday gave me a pull request. The somebody's here actually. We can look at it together maybe. This is on which server? HW3N. Okay, so I put a push. I changed the code yesterday. Let me take a look at it with you 1 second, okay? Because but I read it and I think it's correct, the modification. Did the student test it? I mean, I don't want to put the student on the spot. Yes, he tested it, but I also reread it and I thought it was fine. So let's look at the code. If the destination is public, I do the following. Okay, yeah, you can see it as well. So he improved on my code. There is this dictionary of checked user IDs. I go over the recent messages. If the user ID is not checked yet, then I check whether you have messages. And I say that the checked of this user ID is equal to this status. Otherwise, I use the cached status. And then I say message conversation is equal to that. So this to me kind of makes sense. So let's see whether it's true that it doesn't work. So what's the best way? Yeah, curl would be one. But I think, oh yeah, this is it. So essentially, I wanted to find somewhere that contains the URLs that I want to display in the easiest way. So I can use curl, but I think I can also use just a browser, which is fine. So this would be the get local for user ID Luca. I don't know what it will pull up, okay? But the URL there is wrong. This is the URL, okay? Okay, so let's look at it. There is no field. There is no field that is sorry, I'm flapping around between too many windows. This is what should be running on the server. And the dictionary that gets generated is generated by get local messages. Let me just break the line a bit better so we can see better. And so there should be a field called conversation. So I wonder if I did a wrong code push at some point in time. Sorry, I'm going to the wrong windows. Let me minimize these. And also these for a moment, okay? But this does not seem to contain a field conversation, right? So what is happening? Let me see if I, by any chance, pushed the code to the wrong place. So in app.yaml, there should be the place where I push the code. Let me repush it and see what happens. It should take just a second. Okay. So, okay. If it takes long time, then I first give the class, then I fix it. But let me do one quick check. So why would this be failing? So it's my fault. I should have tested this, right? But okay, line 125, invalid syntax. Okay, this was the single problem. Okay, so let's see whether this now works. Okay, so now there is conversation as well, okay? So this is great. Now let me try to do put local, okay? And now I'm, instead of Luca, I'm Peter, which is my first name, simply. And the destination is equal to Luca, okay? And message is equal to hello. So for example, okay? So now fine, I get this. Now, I think, there is some conversation through, and but it may not be very interesting because now it's all conversation through because it's all private, okay? So now the interesting point is whether, if I go back to the older URL in which I say that the user ID is Luca, and actually this was a get local, okay? So this was what Luca does to get public messages. And so, So we have problems with this pull request, perhaps. Let me use my, but why would it be wrong? What is this user ID? So I think, so what do you do if this happens? One thing one can always do is to look at the history of the revisions, right? So this was the pull request. This was the way the code was just before, and I thought at this point I thought it worked. I mean, I don't know, whether the where the problem is, but let me look at one thing. In controller's default, I had code that said, because I think I know what it is. No. Okay, fine. Let me do it later, okay? Because I don't think it's difficult to check, but I think I don't want to spend the time here. Let me tell you what I will do, okay, when I go back, essentially. So this thing is returning false in all these cases, okay? But we know that there is a conversation between Luca and Peter, okay? So the obvious thing to do, and the way I proceeded to find this type of bugs is this. You see, there is this has messages, right? So what I want to do is that I want to go into this function has private messages with person, and there I want to add a log of when that is called and which users I'm using to check between, right? So I'm checking between Luca and whoever. So I want to log it. For example, already once while I was developing the homework, I made a mistake and I was checking instead of swapping the people. So if I'm Luca and the other person is called Peter, I was checking whether the conversation is between Peter and somebody else and not Luca, right? So I was doing this kind of mistake. So so essentially I need to check it. I don't have a super fast solution because I thought it was right. I tested it and it worked because I posted it. And now it doesn't seem to work, and so I basically don't know what to do. So I'll go back to my office and test it afterwards. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. I mean, thank you for bringing it up. It might be that, but this was broken the whole day yesterday. Eh? Yeah, I mean, at 5 p.m. or so, I put in the push request, and that might have omitted a semicolon. Okay.
Also.
Sorry. Yeah, but after 5 p.m. I put in this, but the pull request that did not change this logic, so I don't think that's the problem. I mean, it may have introduced a semicolon problem, but not this one. Yeah, so unless I'm totally silly, okay, and let me reload. What if I'm Peter?
By the way, we're supposed to be using homework
3N, yeah, 3N as I wrote in the.
I just tried to test the app right now. Without changing the code, it was working just fine the last time I checked.
But it's very strange because I cannot find where I put. I mean, I don't know. Let me check one moment more. Okay, so put local. So suppose that the user ID under which I put it is actually Luca. Where does that message? Where did that message go? Maybe I never put a message. So let me put a message for as user ID Luca and. Okay, now this was a public message. Do I see it here? Yes, no. Do I see my own message? I think it's this. And I have a conversation through. So this I think points to the problem. I must have fixed this problem. That doesn't make sense. So I'm having this sort of. Sorry, these are papers. This is also a paper. One more. Ouch. This is something that doesn't matter. Where did that other window go? Here. So I think the problem is this, that this is not, so what is user ID? Is it mine or not? I mean, who am I here? User ID is my user ID, okay? But message user ID, shouldn't this be message dest? Because I'm checking a message and I want to know if I am the destination of those messages, right? Can somebody with a marker, so this is the recent messages. These recent messages are a dictionary. So, no, but this, no, it was correct. Okay, I think that the best option is again not to do debugging in class. I'm sorry, but you know, I mean, it takes discipline because I always want to go fix it. But let me try not to go fix it. Let me actually, you know, fix it. But then, you know, I point you to the repository. You will see the change that fixes the problem, so that I don't waste your time here. Okay, you had a question?
Yeah. I can see implementing this next homework without this boolean at all. So, like, why is it necessary?
Yeah, good question. So why is it necessary? Because I want you to know whether you're having a conversation with me or not, so that you can click on it to know that I started the conversation with you. And if you started the conversation with me, suppose I post, you know, I like results. Fine. Then, you know, you click on it and you send me a message. And you make people need to be reminded when you go to these general messages that you're talking to this person to say I like results. But suppose you said that you post something like I like soccer. Now, I send that message to you. How do you know that somebody sent you a message related to that? How do you know that somebody is messaging you?
The destination will have my name. And
yeah, but how do you notify on the screen? You are saying essentially that there is an alternative implementation of Homework 3 if you don't need this screen.
Yeah.
This is correct. But as I stated, the Homework 3, the first activity has the use of public messages. We need these in order to mark the public messages so we can have a conversation with the author. We may get a great way of doing it. In fact, at the end of this class, I wanted to essentially open a conversation on how we should do a better version of Homework 3. So, by the way, the plan for homework is this. There is Homework 3 now. Today is the last day to check on homework, to grade Homework 2. I want to give a Homework 4 on what we are doing today, but it's going to be a very simple homework, I believe so, at least. Okay. And then instead I want to turn to making Homework 3 into a better app, but not as the immediately next homework, you know, as, you know, skipping one because I want to give you one on these, okay? Yeah, so this is essentially the plan for the next few things. So, I'm sorry, I feel that the bug is totally trivial, but I also feel that I want to debug it with a bit of, you know, essentially not wasting 100 people's time while I search for the bug, I guess. Okay, so so let me go over web views a moment. So what are web views? First I tell you the principles and then how to do it. Web views is a way to embed a web browser directly into your application. Okay, so you can essentially imagine a web browser like the one you have here, if you will. Okay, but without all the address bar, etc. So essentially only the portion that if I were to mark it, goes from here to here, you know, only the page portion of a web browser, okay? So without what is called the Chrome that goes around it, Okay, you want to include that in as a window or as a sub window, as a rectangle inside your web app. So one of the reasons is why you want to do that. Well, it turns out in Android it's very easy to make what is happening in this web view communicate with the rest of Android. It's very easy from the web page to call inside your Java code, and it's also easy from your Java code to trigger stuff running into the web app. Okay, so essentially there is a way to communicate between the two. Okay, and you may want to do it for a few different reasons. I think Justin has agreed later on in the class to give a class on how to even avoid writing mostly Android code. But you do everything in a web view using JavaScript and JavaScript frameworks. And then, that is a presentation layer, and that is basically all your app, and it becomes portable between devices. So one reason is portability, okay? Another reason is that if you're in a hurry, it may be a good solution. For example, many developers already have a web version of their app. And in many cases, you need to have a mobile-friendly web version of your product, right? Because in any case, there are people who have not installed the app, but that may want to use your product. A typical case is this. Suppose I want to make a product that can be shareable. So, I do this funny thing here, and then I share that link, and this link that he gets via email or via SMS or via whatever, he should be able to click on it and it opens in the browser, and let's assume that we are redesigning Facebook, just to give an example, okay? I may have the Facebook app, but then I share a link with him on Facebook. And he should be able to just use the Chrome browser on the phone to open the link and see, maybe not as good experience as with the app, but some experience. So it's often the case that you cannot escape from the need of making a web version of your of what you're doing. Okay, not because it works better, but because it facilitates user acquisition, which is one of the fundamental problems of when you develop. Okay, so once we have a mobile-friendly version of your website, if you are in a hurry and you have few developers, what an easy solution is to say, well, fine, I recycle my work, and you make a web view so that portion of the product runs in the web view, and some portion of the product may have physical button or things like these. For example, we did it in an early version of an app we made in a startup. We had this thing in which you can view webcam images, and we had to design it for the web anyways, because you may just have a browser and you want to look at these webcam images, right? So we had this version already, and it was working kind of well in the web, but we didn't want to just use people using Chrome, the browser, because I think I told you that the web and mobile is very different points of view to how to present material. The point of view of the web is that you have these rectangular peephole on a bigger reality, so that when you scroll with the finger, you're moving the big reality behind the rectangular viewport, okay? Which means that if you try to pick buttons that are fixed at the bottom, we wanted to do something like this. Just to explain the things that are easier not to do, okay? So ideally, we wanted to have something like this. I mean, this is all old stuff, we changed many times what they do. But we wanted to have some fixed buttons here, and then we wanted to have like these images that could scroll over there, so that you could see maybe 2.5, and you would be able to review things easy, like you do in many of these photo apps, no? And if you do it all in the web in a single viewport, what happens is that you do to scroll the images up. I think I told you this at the beginning of the class. These buttons belong to the same surface, and so they also scroll up. And it's a mess because the phone is not fast enough to do these very tight JavaScript event-driven loops that reposition them all the time. So the only clean solution would be that when you scroll, you stop showing the buttons, and when the scrolling event stops, you show them again. No? And this is kind of ugly. I mean, it's okay, it's not perfect. But essentially, since the code that displayed these images was complicated, because it was doing a lot of stuff, it handled when you touch one, it would start playing the movie. When you did this, it would do that, and whatever else it did, and yada yada. So it's difficult, in a single blow, to build apps for Android, iOS, Anyway, you need the mobile version for the mobile browser, right? So a shortcut that even a company like Facebook took at the beginning was to just have most of the app run inside a web view, and then maybe wire the buttons to it. The first version of the Facebook app even was written using a web view, I think, for Android. Okay, so it's an easy way to recycle the work. This is one point. Another point for using web views is this. Often there is work that is a little bit harder to replicate on the locally. For example, I don't know, another typical example that I see many apps doing. Some apps, you develop for the web some complicated login sequence. You get these login screens that say, would you like to log in with Facebook, with Google, to create an account, to do this and to do that, and there is a complicated logic that goes behind that authentication. And, speed is not essential. You're going to do it only once, Once you log in the app, you're logged in and nothing ever changes anymore, right? So it's not super important. And you just want to avoid coding this complicated login activity natively in the app. What is a typical, and, anyway, it's a fact that, if the network is down, you're not going to be able to log in anyways, right? So there is no drawback in having a bit of dependence on the network. So what do? Well, you simply do a login procedure by using a web view that uses another site to log in. When the login is completed, the other site gives you an access token, like a big secret number. You store it in the phone because the web view, as I told you, via JavaScript can communicate with your Java. So it can give you this string. You take this string, you store it in your settings, like you know how to do now, and you're right. Okay, so you avoid re-implementing the login flow in every possible application. Another case that is in my opinion, quite important is this. If I build an app, everybody is using the app, and you only update the app when you like. Some people have it on auto update, some other people, may update 1 year after. So you're never sure actually which version of the app people are running. So a very important consideration if you build a real product is how fast can I push updates even to people who do not update the app. Okay, so often you are able to do that via JavaScript. Okay, because via JSON, because for example. I'm sorry that I use so many examples on things I did, but those are the examples I know. Okay, so don't complain about that. I cannot do examples about things I don't know. But for example, this app, one thing it does is that it's able to search for webcams on the local network, and for each one of them, it's able to configure it for you. And webcams on the market, they change. Okay. And they change, and the options are all different. For example, this one has infrared, the other one has the microphone, the third one has, the blue light that can flash, yes or no, and they change. So, one approach would have been to invent in JSON a general camera description. And, we would pass to the phone so that if a new camera comes on the market, we can pass to the phone a new camera description segment, and somehow the app would be able to, decode it. But this is never flexible enough. You can never anticipate what the crazy new manufacturer will do. And also, these setup instructions are often very complicated. I mean, it seems a trivial task, but these manufacturers, always have complications. You need to set up the wireless password, the this, the that, the gateway, the whatever, the NTP, I mean, it's always a mess in practice. Okay. So you want some flexibility so that, if you also get the new instructions wrong, you are able to fix them and give it immediately. So there is a big contrast between developing for the web and for a phone, right? On the web, if you make a mistake like the one I've made for the server here, you fix it, you redeploy, and everybody, boom, is on the new version of your web code. There is no lag. But on mobile, there is lag. And so using web views is a way to eliminate this lag for parts of the application. Okay, so for example, there for the webcam configuration, we decide, okay, fine, we give up. We just use a web view that asks you all the questions about how you want to configure each webcam. So we can update it server side, and if you we can modify it. Everybody has always the latest version of the configuration. Okay. yes, it's not as pretty, but anyway, you're never going to configure a webcam if you're not on the network, right? Because you cannot do it anyways. So there is no big drawback in having to talk to a server and getting a webcam. There is no issue of caching, okay? And so this works well again, okay? So I think there are these main reasons. Recycling of code, being able to push zero delay updates to everybody, so everybody has the latest version of it. And you know, Justin would show you essentially how to even avoid building for Android altogether, you know, even though that, you know, has some performance consequences. But these are the main reasons. So let's move on how to do it. It's actually pretty easy. So I told you already what web views are. So how do you add it? Well, you know, a web view is a type of view. So you can put it in a page, in a you know, activity XML file, and you can define how big it is. It doesn't need to take the whole screen. You know, you define essentially where it goes, obviously. And to load a page, you use the method called load URL, in which you just give it a URL string. For once, Java is simple. You don't need to parse this in a URI and do funny stuff to it. Unbelievable, right? And you need to have the right permission, of course, the internet permission. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So this is easy. Okay, you define it in the XML. You load it to a URL. You can also not load any URL, but then it's simply white. You know, it's less interesting. Okay, now you can enable JavaScript. So if you want to enable JavaScript, which you normally want to do, you have to do it manually. So you have to essentially get the web view and say that JavaScript is enabled. Okay, and that will enable it. Okay. Now, this is the fun part. So very often, you want the web view to communicate with your phone, okay? Because otherwise, it's a very, you know, it's essentially not a very interesting thing to do, right? If you can just, I mean, then you're simply hosting something that doesn't give you anything back. You know, there is not so much purpose, I guess. So how do you enable the JavaScript in the web view to call your Java code? What you do is this: you build a JavaScript a class that is you can call JavaScript interface, okay? And you can define functions that get string arguments. So the only nuisance is that, as far as I know, what you can pass around these strings. But by now, you know that this is not a big limitation, because if you want to pass around more complicated stuff, what you do is that on both sides, you can encode it using JSON, and you can pass it around the way you want, okay? So strings is not so bad. I mean, after all, the web app itself, you know, is going to talk in strings to the server. So, strings seems to be the common denominator, okay? So you define this class. This class is essentially, it will contain all the methods that the JavaScript should be able to call, okay?
In order so that we can implement JavaScript within the browser. So, for example, if you have JavaScript that, you know, makes, I don't know, something fancy appear on the screen.
Yeah, let me give a simple example, okay? After the login activity, the server will generate a token, and you want the JavaScript in the page to store this token on the phone permanently.
Okay, so we're talking about not the JavaScript that's going to just make something inside the browser. We're talking about this is for the JavaScript that has to work within your phone.
Yes, yes. This is how to have the JavaScript in the web view do stuff on your phone. Do general stuff on your phone. It could be anything. It could be like, you know, give me my location. This is what you could be saying, right? Or it could be, for example, you know, store this secret token. Or it could be, I don't know, like give me the name of your Google account. I don't know, something like that, right? I mean, whatever is needed, essentially. Okay, so you make this class that has public functions that correspond to the methods you want to make available. Okay, and okay, and then you bind it to the Android code. Essentially, what do? You you get your web view again, okay, and you say web view add the JavaScript interface, and you say new JavaScript interface of these. So what am I doing? In the JavaScript interface, notice that in the initialization I pass to it the context. I always do it because of these. Suppose one of these methods has to access the screen or anything like that. You know, the context is the activity in which this lives, and so I have a reference back to it. Or suppose, you know, even more simply, that this myFunction method needs to store a reference on the phone. You know that you can only store references if you get your how it is called, get default preferences or something like that. You know, it has a similar name, but you have, that's a method of the context. So you need to store the context somewhere in this JavaScript interface if you want it to be very useful. Okay, so that's why I initialize it in this way. So when so I do the following: I get to the web view, I add the JavaScript interface in creating one, okay, and you give it a name, Android, I call it. You can call it whatever you want, okay. This is because this does the following. In JavaScript, inside of the web browser, I mean, I don't know how you know JavaScript, but I will give you some simple examples. But for those of you who know, JavaScript is a language in which you can define objects and all this kind of stuff, right? So this will define an object in JavaScript called Android, with the name you give. And the object will have the methods of the class JavaScript interface, of the class JavaScript interface. Okay, so this essentially creates a new object in Android that contains all the methods of your interface, so that you can actually call them. Okay, so in fact, from JavaScript, if I am inside somewhere, I say Android.myFunction, yada yada, and this will call of the object Android the thing that is called myFunction, which is this one. Okay. So it's actually very, very easy to call from JavaScript to Android. Is this clear? So here you define the JavaScript interface. So here you define the Java counterpart, what will be called, okay? It's a class that has many public methods. I mean, as many as you like, no? And here is how you bind it to the JavaScript. You say add JavaScript interface, you give it an object of your class, and you give it the name of the object that should be created inside JavaScript. Yes?
Are there any general interfaces that web developers can use? For example, if you use the Chrome app on your Android phone, are there any methods that developers can use that they'll just know that they have access to it through your phone if they get permission somehow, or does it all have to depend on, you have to have a very specific app if you want to be able to do anything with Chrome?
Yeah, very good question. So essentially, you know, the Chrome browser on a phone does not have particularly access to special things on the phone itself. I may be wrong, but I think that's the situation. I mean, Chrome has this, you know, location API, etc., but that's implemented inside the Chrome. Yeah, you wanted to correct
There are a couple of like accelerometers you can check sometimes.
via HTML5. Yeah. Yes, but this is not built via this mechanism of interface. It's built inside of the Chrome browser. I mean, probably in a similar way, but it's built. So essentially, there are a few like that, but not so much. They're very, I don't know. I mean, the problem is that they want to be extremely security conscious. You know, this can open a huge hole in your security. Because now, the problem is this. The JavaScript interface is stuff you wrote, so you know what's in it. But the website is not, right? And so you expect them to load it not on HTTPS. You know, they can feed you anything. You know, there can be a man-in-the-middle attack via DNS, and somebody can send you JavaScript code that if your JavaScript interface exposes too much of the phone, they could be fishing out all the data you have for all you know, right? And it's not so hard to do. So there is a real security issue. You should be careful what you do in these methods. And if you do anything sensitive, you should at least check that you do everything under HTTPS. But you have to be aware that, you know, so far, if you write in Java, everything that you run is what you have written. So, you know, you can shoot yourself in the foot in various ways, but at least the code is what you wrote and is not something you haven't, you know, you're not loading dynamically any other stuff. But if you do something like this, now suddenly you are, because the JavaScript code, of course, you have the illusion you control it because you write it and you put it on the server. But if there is any attack, it may not be what you think it is. Okay, and so you have to be very careful about that. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So very good observation. So what can you implement in a library? Well, we can store something. Okay. So this is the example I was telling you about. If they give you a string that is a secret, you can have a method that says set secret, then you get your shared preferences, and you write it there. This is a simple example. Okay. You can also affect the UI. Now you have to be careful because this is the first time after this class we see more often that we deal with the fact that there are multiple threads. So the web view JavaScript does not run in the UI thread. Okay. So this enables essentially the web view to have its own behavior, while the UI, you can still push buttons and do your own stuff on the UI. But this means that from these callback functions in the JavaScript interface, you cannot actually directly call, and change the color of a button. I mean, this is something we wanted to do with the web command. We wanted to make sure, for example, that if you, let me do this is not what we did, but let me give it as a simple example, okay? Suppose that these are images from different cameras, and suppose that these buttons are enabled you to select the camera. I'm just making it up, but just as an example, okay? You may want that when you click on an image from the camera A, the button that says A changes color, just so that you know what you're doing here, okay? Simple example. So this means that the web view would have to detect that if I press to this image, and it would need to tell the rest of the phone, hey, change the color of the button like that. And so we need to call a JavaScript function that then has to affect the UI. I'm making the example up, but it's as good as any. So the point is this. Now you call the JavaScript interface, but when you call a function normally, you are in the thread of where you were. So if it's the JavaScript that calls you that Java function, even though in your file, I think that maybe you don't have this problem, but where is my chalk? But I always have this problem when I read code, and so I think generally this works. You have a big piece of code. I mean, how many of you raise your hand? I don't understand that you can now memory. But raise your hand if you have written multi-threaded code so far. Okay, so actually not too many, but some percentage of you has. So the super difficult thing that at least for me when I write multi-threaded code is the following. This is my file, and these are methods or whatever, and chunks of code. And usually, I think that if you write multi-threaded code, you have this illusion that if these two things are together, of course they go together, like they're in the same thread. No? And this is the one thing that I find difficult about multi-threaded code, that this is what is not true anymore. Okay? Maybe this runs in the UI thread, this runs in the UI thread, and maybe, but things don't belong to a thread. Things belong to code. And they belong to the thread that calls them. So maybe these are only called by the UI thread, okay? But maybe this is our JavaScript interface, and it's there, it's together with all the rest of the code we have. But that one is instead called by the JavaScript inside the web view, and so this one, it will be like a paria, right? It will be like, it's like all the others, except it's not, because it will be running its own thread, basically. And so, the functions that would above and below it can just say, hey, give me this view and put the color to green. And that one can't. Because no, even though it's written in the same place, no, that one is called by the other thread. Okay? So there is this big difference between syntactic scope and dynamic scope of the thread in which you actually are when you run that. And that's a big difference. And I think at least for me, it's the biggest cause of mental confusion. Okay, because you see code that is side by side, but it does not belong to the same environment, because it may belong to a totally different thread. Okay, so these are, I mean, I warn you because we will see it in the future, but it's a sort of the big block. Okay, so now you write this method that wants to affect the UI, and so you are here and say, help me. You know, I'm here, I'm like all the others, but I cannot touch the UI. How do I touch the UI? And so what you do in order to touch the UI, you will see that there are better ways. I mean, there is a large number of ways, but the simplest way is this. It's like the UI thread is above, no? It's closer to the screen. I'm down the microprocessor guts. So, and I want to give it to something that can do the work for me. So what I do is this. I package what I want to do, because in Java everything is an object. So I package what I want to do is in a runnable object. A runnable object sounds very complicated, but it's an object that has a method called run. And when you call the method run, it runs. Great idea. This is a super complication of Java. I mean, in other cases, you could simply package this into a function, but in this case, no, it has to be a runnable object with a method run. Great. But essentially, you package what you want to do in a runnable object, and then you ship it up, this runnable object, to UI thread and say, please run it when you can. Okay, and the UI thread has this thing. We will see in detail further in the subsequent classes. Okay. But the UI thread, like every thread, has something that is called a looper. Here we don't need to worry about it explicitly, but I start to tell you this. Okay, the looper is something that essentially is there waiting for stuff. And when it gets something, you can pass to it either messages or objects to be run. So when you give it an object to be run, it says, "Ooh, great, another thing to do," and it calls the run method of that object. Okay, so that's the way it works. So this is a complicated explanation. In practice, the amount of code is not so large. So what you need to do is simply this. In this private void affect UI, or public void might be, I mean, I don't care. I don't know. I think it might have to be public void, actually. But what you do is this. You say, run on UI thread. This is this method that says, please take this object that I packaged for you and call its method run, but not here. No, in the UI thread. After you give it to the looper will run it in the UI thread, okay? And so I build an object in which I say new runnable. This gives me a runnable object, okay? And I say public void run. So I on the fly define what the run method will do, and then I can say text view v is equal to, so in the runnable object, this stuff here, these two lines actually run in the UI thread. Oops, sorry. These two lines happen in the UI thread. And what they do is this. They get to the text view, and they set the text to arguments, which is these arguments that was passed. Okay? But these two lines, you could not have executed them safely in the thread in which affect UI was called. That's the whole point of it. So I know that it's incredibly simple, but also confusing at the same time in my mind, because threads are the first time in which syntax does not tell you the whole picture. You have this extra piece of information, which is which thread you happen to be in, and it's very important. Okay, so is it okay? Is it clear what happens? Okay. Okay. So okay, good. Now doing the reverse. Now, how do you instead from JavaScript? No, from Java. How do you trigger stuff in Java in the web view? Okay. Because you may also want to do the vice versa. For example, suppose the JavaScript says, please give me the location. Maybe the location is not available immediately. And like in the UI thread, another thing that is doing JavaScript is that it is never solved. Right? You cannot wait for the recurrent type of thing. You do something and then you wait to be called back when the thing is ready, actually. And so, if you wanted the location, you cannot see it say, give me the location, and then you sit there waiting forever. What you do is give me the location, and at most you give it a callback. But as soon as that, you say, hey, start your location manager, and then you expect a callback. How does the phone tell JavaScript that something has changed. And you know, the cases can be many. For example, another example, okay? Suppose we do again this fake app in which we have these webcams and the button to choose which webcam you are using, okay? Now, if the user clicks on the middle button, the middle button is associated, you know, that will need to tell the web view which is displaying the images, hey, now please show me webcam number B instead of A, right? Something like that, right? So, you know, you may have other UI elements, so the user touched one of them and you need to let the JavaScript know, okay? So essentially the code is very easy, is what you're seeing here, webview.load URL, and you, but instead of loading a normal URL that starts with HTTP or HTTPS or so, you have this special scheme called JavaScript. I've never seen it anywhere else. Have you? No. I think they invented it especially for web views. But if you have this JavaScript scheme, then what happens next is JavaScript gets executed. Okay? So you must be a little bit careful about quoting the arguments. But yeah, it's a little bit of a pain, if you will. But yes, that's how you do it. Yes?
I've seen that syntax before.
In the browser. Okay, in any browser? Okay, fun. Let me try it. JavaScript alert. Yep. Great, thank you. Yeah, I had never tried it. Okay. Now we go to the fine points. So if you do the super normal thing, what happens? If you do the super normal thing, you have a web view, you load a URL, the page may contain links, and all the links are opened in the web view in turn. Okay, so you are essentially jailed in the web view, which may be absolutely fine. Okay. Another idea is this. So, for example, you know, this is directly relevant to the homework I want to give you. I want to give you essentially a homework in which you have to build, you know, a simple news app in which when you click on something, you go on the page of, say, a newspaper. And when you navigate inside the newspaper, you do it in the web view, giving the impression that you're using an app, okay? But if the newspaper contains a link to, say, Wikipedia, instead of the link to Wikipedia, you know, once you navigate to Wikipedia, you should not say an app. But at that point, you should be able to escape, and the Wikipedia link will be opened by, you know, if you have the Wikipedia app, by the Wikipedia app, and otherwise by the regular Chrome browser, okay? So suppose you want to do something like that. So in general, it's a very common need. You may want to use the web view to give an in-app impression for some site, but you wanted to make sure that if somebody wants to browse out of it, they can get out of it. Otherwise, what happens is that users become enraged, right? Because they think essentially, you know, expletive. I want to visit site X, and this gives me this, you know, expletive confined experience, you know, in which I don't have any other button to bookmark, share, or do whatever I want. You know? So it's not generally not a good idea to cage them inside for the whole web experience. You know? You want to do it only for a limited portion of the web. So what you do is this, that you can have this should override URL loading. And this essentially enables you to return false if this false means it's, you know, one of the things you learn when you work with others, and you learn two things. One is never ask at the same time a question that is negation. There is, you know, I do it all the time, unfortunately. Did you buy the chicken, or did you bring it, or did you bring it with you? Yes. Great. No, this is an example. But the other thing is not to ask too many negative questions, and this is what they're doing here. Should override URL loading. I mean, they should have called it should load URL, and then everybody would have understood, right? But instead, they ask about the overriding. So essentially, if you return false, it's because true they should load it. Okay. So it's a bit silly, but this is the way it is. And so, for example, if suppose we want to browse www.example.com in this web view. Okay, then we say if you are given the URL, and so you can say if the host is equal to www.example.com, then I return false. I don't want the URL loading to be overridden by anything. Okay. If instead the host is not example.com, what do I want to do? I want to override the URL loading. So I want essentially the web app not to try to load anything, okay? And instead I want to launch an intent that will trigger the browser. So this is easy to do. You return true for the URL loading. And otherwise, you build an intent, as I taught you the last time, so that will cause a view intent on that URL. And then all the browsers that you have will be available to you as choices to browse that. Okay, so you essentially can do this. You are able to define very precisely what you are able to browse. This sounds simple in theory, but in practice is a mess. It's simple if you do it your own site, but even if you do it for the New York Times, it's complicated. I don't know the New York Times especially, but they use m.nytimes.com, and then they do something like I don't know, magazine-ny times. They make a complicated set of pages that correspond to them. Even more complicated is if you want to do box in this way, these things that enable you to log in via Facebook and Google and Yahoo and whatever else. Because all those login mechanisms redirect you through a sequence of URLs, and it's usually quite complicated to make sure that they do the proper thing. I remember spending a considerable number of hours on this simple, decision of what to override and what not. So it's not so simple in practice, but in theory, it's just you decide when you want to load and when not. You can also handle errors. One of the semi-surprising things is this. So when you have a web view, you have the web view, but you don't have some of the other behavior that is associated with the web view. For example, you don't have these pop-ups that I did before, alert hello. It doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't let you pop up anything. No, you will need to define a handler for the pop-up. And so the same when there is an error. If there is a 404 error, a browser tells you 404 page not found. The web view will not tell you anything. Per se. If you don't define what to do, it will simply not tell you anything. And so you need to use these methods that say on received error, okay? And this is somewhat important because, if you try to debug an app that contains a web view, you often, see absolutely nothing and then go nuts because, the web view does not have as good logs as the rest of Android. And so you say, what's happening? Why nothing happens? And there is an error, but it's not displayed in the usual way because you have defined the no handler for the errors. So you need to do that. It's a a way to waste a few hours otherwise. Yeah.
On the other slide, for the error code, would that be like a browser receive like 404?
Yeah.
So you can just
I checked this 1.5 years ago. So everybody is on that. Yeah. By the way, no, okay, it doesn't work so well. One thing that I wanted to point out is that if you develop for the web or a normal Chrome on mobile, there is a way to connect the things so that you can debug the Chrome on the mobile using a big debugger on the screen of your laptop in which you can explore it. Similarly to the way you develop, when you develop for the web from Chrome, you can open the developer mode and see everything. You can essentially hook up the developer mode of your laptop to the Chrome browser on your mobile phone. Okay. And that helps. But in this case, it's different because this is a web view. So it's in some ways a little bit harder to debug, okay? But you can still log things. What I don't know, but I think I would be surprised if it doesn't happen in the right way, is this. You can log things also from JavaScript, and I believe that these should end up in your Android log, but I haven't checked. We should check it. It would make sense, but I don't know. Not everything that makes sense. So I was telling you that the alerts don't show up. This is because you need to handle Chrome. This is something I never needed to do. But if you want to handle pop-up windows and this kind of stuff, you need to essentially decide what to do when these things change. The main methods are on create window to handle the pop-ups. You can just not care about the pop-up, or you can switch to it. But you know, a web view is a single surface. You don't have a mechanism to do pop-ups on top of it. So you should decide what to do if a pop-up happens. On JavaScript alert, these are the alerts, you know, you have seen one a moment ago. And on progress change, this is essentially for the load bar. Do you want to display a load bar? Yes, no, it's your choice. But if you want to, you know, that's the hook you use in order to display the load bar. Okay. Handling the back button. This in principle is so what's the problem with the back button? The problem with the back button is this, that if you don't do anything, the back button on Android is not the back button on the web view. So if you are, you know, I mean, imagine that I land on the New York Times, then I go read an article on, I don't know, the earthquake in Nepal, right? Then I hit back. You don't go to the homepage of the New York Times if you don't do anything special. You remove that activity from the stack and you go to the previous activity that was on the top of the stack before. You know, that's the back button in Android, and that's what it does. Okay, so if you instead wanted to, the obvious way is this. Now imagine, let's imagine a bit this sequence, which is actually what you have to do in the homework. So I'm essentially giving you the pieces of the homework, so that's why I don't think we have that off. But here, you know, we will have a list of newspapers. For example, you know, there is a New York Times and there are others. If you click on New York Times, you know, we will have a page, no, where here we will see the web view of the New York Times. You know, and here there will be a few buttons below, like you know, maybe one will be share and others other buttons. Okay, whatever. So we land here and we see, you know, these New York Times, etc., etc. And then, you know, here there will be in the web page an article of maybe Nepal. Okay, so then you click on Nepal, you know, and then these will take you to the you know, Nepal article. And when you're doing this, let's look at the activity stack. So the activity stack here is main activity, and that's it. Okay, here there is main activity and web view on top. Okay, and here there is still main activity and web view on top. Okay, because going from here actually is not a link; it's just, you know, following a link in the web app. Okay, so now if you follow the return from here, what happens? So the return is hardwired in Android, and you can override it. But otherwise, what it does is it pops off the top activity and goes back to the new top, right? So essentially, if you're in a file and press back, you would end up here, which is typically not what you want to do, right? I mean, it might be in some cases, but not in this case. So what you do in order to end up in the right place, or, you know, to tie better the back button with the normal navigation and behavior, what you do is this. This is, by the way, an important ability that you always have. You can always override what happens when you press the back button. You cannot override the home button, because otherwise, you know, you would be able to essentially tie users' hands in a loop in a place where they cannot get out of. So you're not allowed to override the home button, which is a big mess sometimes for some apps, because, okay, fine, then let me skip that. But instead, you can always override the back button, and you can decide where it's most logical to go. Let me give you another example. Sometimes you are in a sequence of activities, and you know that if you press back, it doesn't make sense to bring you back one place at a time. You just want to go back all of a sudden. What you can do is override the back button and say, hey, here's an intent to go back to the beginning, and I add the flag clear top, so that when I go back to the beginning, you know, this is the beginning. There are all these places on top of the stack, but when I press return, you know, all these places disappear, and the beginning is again at the top. Okay, so that's a typical way I use the back button. You will see it in many. I mean, suppose that you have these, you know, I don't know what a good example is, but there are these apps in which you know, you have this sequence of introductory screens, yada, 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 some more. But at the beginning, you had the choice of whether to log in or do something else. And if you're in the middle of the introduction, you say back. Typically, you want to go back to the beginning, right? So that you can make your choice again. I mean, there are many cases in which your instinct will tell you that the back should be doing something else than simply going back one step. So this is in general important. Now, the way you do it is this. You grab the web view. I don't know why I don't grab it here. I assume that I have it already, I guess. But you ask, if my web view can go back, then go back. So the web view is kind enough to tell you whether it has empty history or not. Because, you know, otherwise, if it didn't tell you, even when you are here and you press back button, you sort of stay there, right? And instead, at that point, you want to go here. So you can say, if you can go back, which means if you have non-zero history, then the web view should go back, not the activity. Otherwise, I want the activity to go back, okay? And so the way you do it is this. If the web view can go back, go back. Else, super on back pressed. This means, you know, else I do the default behavior. Super is the super class of this activity, and the activity that you are instantiating essentially defines a default behavior for the back button, which is what you want to use in this case, okay? Pausing a web view. So pausing a web view requires a little bit of art, because unfortunately, they added a method to pause a web view. So let me tell you first the problem, what it is. The silly thing that you will almost surely do if you are not careful is this. When you do a non-pause, you simply believe that everything is fine and you pause. But the trouble is this. On pause and on stop, don't take care of stopping threads that are not a UI thread. So if you enable JavaScript in your web view, now you have another thread. Even if you stop your app, that JavaScript will keep running and will keep using your battery and draining it, okay? So it's extremely important that when you have a non-pause, you actually take care of pausing the thread that is in the web browser. Android will not pause it for you. It will not pause other threads for you, okay? That's the prime way in which, I mean, you can argue it's a mistake, and I think it is, in fact. It's a design mistake, likely. But you know, otherwise you would need to be able to flag threads with the fact that they shouldn't be paused. I mean, there is no great solution. But this is a #1 cause why some apps run down your battery. You know, they forget to shut off some thread when you pause the whole app. And the complication is this: new browsers, so new web apps, I think phones since 2 point something, but not incredibly early. Have a pause method in the web app that pauses the JavaScript thread, and you are very happy because you can pause it and you can restart it. Old phones do not, okay? And so you cannot call pause on old phones. Now, this is a material I developed for a couple of years ago when those old phones were very predominant. Now I think they may be around 10% of the population of phones. But the problem is this. The problems are two. First of all, if you simply say webapp.pause, you get a Java error that says, I'm sorry, the pause method is not guaranteed to be present unless you define the minimum level of API to be XYZ. And so if you want to encompass more phones, you cannot do that. Okay? And the other problem is what to do on the phones that don't support pause. So what you do is this, to get out of these problems. You use the Java introspection methods. So this is a way in which Java can ask, please, give me this method of this class, of this object, if it exists. And if it does not, you know, you give me none. And so in this way, you know, you can handle the case of new and old type of objects in a smooth way. So what you do is this to pause it. I say method pause is equal to null. So I don't know yet if the method pause exists for my web app. Then I say try, because this can give you an error. Try pause is equal to webview.class.getMethod on pause. So I try to ask whether the method pause exists in the WebView class. Okay, this can fail, like no such method exception. But if it fails, I just say, well, too bad. I don't do anything. I don't even care to log it. Okay. So at the end of this, if the method exists, I will have it in pause. And then the second part of the code comes in which I do this. If I have a method pause, then I call it. And you call it this way, pause.invoke on my web view. It's the opposite. What you want to do is my web view.pause, right? But this is a Java syntax. Invoke this method object and you give it as argument what it should be invoked on. Fine, okay? So you try to invoke it, and again, you catch everything you possibly can because you need to catch it. Else, so what to do if there is no method pause? Then you need to do a silly trick. You need to do this. You need to store. Sorry. You say suspend URL is equal to my web view get URL. So you take this URL suspend. You take the current URL and you put it somewhere where you can render it. In this case, I simply put it into an activity variable. You may want to store it in the same things. I mean, it's your business. Generally, putting it into an activity variable is fine, okay? But you essentially keep track of where you are, and then you do this super crazy stuff. You load a URL that points locally on the phone to a page that does exactly nothing. Okay? Because since by loading a page that does nothing, it will essentially ensure that there is no JavaScript running. It's a stupid trick, okay? So essentially it means that when you put the phone to sleep, you load an empty URL. You load an empty page. And the empty page, this is the interesting thing here. You can not only, that's a general URL. So instead of giving it a URL of the form http:// you give it a URL of the form file://. And so essentially the page, the HTML page that will be loaded from your application statically. So you don't need the network when you suspend the phone. It's much faster, obviously, as well. Okay? And so when you resume a web view, again, you do this mess, but in the other direction. So what you do essentially is this, that you want to try to get to the method on resume. If you get it, you are happy and you call it, because this means, it sounds like one of these children's songs, no? If you get it, you are happy and you call it, something like that. But if you get it, you are happy and you call it, which means that you can just resume the web view. And if you don't get it, this means if the resume is not null, then you invoke it and you're fine. Else, what you do is this: you look at your suspend URL. Did you store any suspend URL that you still keep track of? If so, load it. Otherwise, load whatever default page you want to load. Okay. So this is unfortunately, kind of, semi-boring bookkeeping, but I'm giving it to you because I at least, the documentation changes all the time. But when I implemented this the first time, this, I could not find a single place that spent these all all at once. And so I went a little bit through loops because, of course, our app had a lot of JavaScript running, and so we had to decide what to do. How do we shut it off exactly? Oh, okay, we can do this, but then we don't support old phones. And it so happened that we wanted to support a lot of old phones to ensure that we work from any possible device people might have, and so on and so forth. So I spent a bit of time, putting this together, and now though it's sort of simple. So this is the last slide. Authenticated to a web service. So in general, you can do a couple of things. One way is that the user can enter username and password in your app, and you can send them with every request. This sounds crazy, but it's not absolutely horrible. It's only partly horrible. If you do it with HTTPS, in theory at least, even though we know very well of the man-in-the-middle attacks that were possible for a long time in various ways, maybe I should give you some connection on man-in-the-middle attacks and how they happened in history. But essentially, Apple for the longest time had a bug in their code in the Safari browser, And then there was this code for the longest time. There was this bug in SSL. Then there were people that essentially attack the domain name servers, attack the domain authorities on the web, so that then you believe you have the wrong certificate, etc., etc. So sending username and password in HTTPS is sort of secure, but is not secure on the time scale of years. Okay, I mean they can catch it, and the problem is that then they really have your password. Then there is also another problem. On the server, typically the password is not stored in plain text. So if you give me username and password every time, what does the server need to do? It's Luca and banana. No? So you get Luca banana, and then you need to look at the database, get the hashed password for me, hash banana in the right way, and see whether it matches with that password. Okay, and you can do that. But you try to be faster to respond to web requests. I can't be your question then, okay? But you need to be faster to respond to these requests. And every time doing these database accesses and hashing is not super ideal, right? You're just wasting time. A better idea is this. I say that I'm Luca banana. This goes up. For one time, my password is checked. And then the server produces for me a very long random token, but not entirely random, a very long random token that I can check is valid by just looking at the token. Okay, you can use cryptography to do things like these. For example, you can you simply make it out of a space in which only few entries are valid. And now I blank out on a good scheme for doing that. But for example, this would be a way. Okay, the server has a secret key, and then it invents a very big random number, and then it gives me back the very big random number together with a hash generated with my secret key as well. So maybe I should write it so that you see how it is done. I teach you this is not necessary for Android, but it's a common technique, and I think it's good that you know it. What you do is this: the server has a server secret that is very important not to leak it out. But that is only on the server and is never transmitted. So there is this secret key. Then I send my username and my username and password is verified independently. Now I want to give you to this user a long random thing that has this property. I can check whether it's valid, even though with a zero database access. How do I do? I do this. I invent a big random number. A big random number, it doesn't need to be like 64 bits. You can generate arbitrary length random numbers. You might as well generate 256 random bytes. Okay. So you generate a big random number, then you use a secure hash to hash these two things. For example, use I don't know, SHA-256 or even some other hashing, whatever you want, and you generate another big hash signature. Okay. At this point, you take these two pieces, not the secret key, and you give it to the foreign. Okay, this is a way to say, hey, here's this key. If you show me this, I know it's valid. Okay, and actually maybe in this random number we have Luca as well. Okay, so we have both the user and the random number, so that it's even easier. Okay, so this gives my user and my random number. Now I store this thing in my phone preferences. Next time I talk to the server, what do? I give to the server this. Okay, I give back what I got. And what does the server do? It first separates, this thing here believes that they are Luca. Let's see if they're telling the truth. No? Then they split these along this line. Now the server knows the secret and checks. Does this plus this, if I compute the hash, computes the same hash I was sent, if the hashes match, then that's a legitimate request. If the hashes don't match, then I throw it out. Okay? And so you can do these checks very fast because you don't need to do any database access. Okay? And you can know that this is a legitimate request by user Luca. This is, there are various tricks, but this is one of them. Okay? a lot of what you do when you design things, by the way, is to a lot of computer science really is about memory hierarchy, right? You want to be able to do computation without touching slower layers of memory. And so in this case, also the problem is that you want to be able to authenticate people without going to a database request. A database request maybe, you know, 20 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds. On Google App Engine, I think is 20 to 30 milliseconds, which is a huge time based on you know, processor compared with processor speed. There is also another advantage in doing something like this. You know, suppose I after some point I tell them, you know, I'm sorry I've been hacked. I think, you know, something happened. You know, then you can essentially you can revoke these codes. I mean, this code is actually non-revocable, okay? So, but you can have other schemes similar to these in which you can revoke the code without revoking the password, okay? I mean, I don't want to go too much into these now, but there are ways of making that independent from the password, and so more revocable. Okay. Maybe I should not go fully into that. Is there still a question from there?
Yeah, I was wondering how tokens were different from cookies.
Yeah, they're very related, right? So, but cookies normally require database access, and so they're easy to revoke as well. So the cookie works in this way. I give you I mean, the simplest way. Okay, a cookie is just a big random number. And it might encode information, but for a lot of websites, it's enough to give you a very big random number. When you access my website, I hit the cookie, I look it up in a table, and this tells me, oh, this is, I don't know your name, but what's your name? John. So, oh, this is Jonathan, and you can read a lot more things. So this is Jonathan, his time zone is PST because I already determined, and actually, in the section installed in a web server, we can associate a lot of information about the user. And it's generally helpful to put a lot of stuff in the section, because that's all stuff that if you need often, you can fish it out of the database in a single go. You know, what you want to need is a number of different accesses to the database. It would be inefficient to say, oh, this is Jonathan, and then look up in another table, what time zone is Jonathan today? You know, and it would be slow. Instead, if I want access to the chart that is Jonathan, I might as well have all the information I can do. Okay? So, yeah. So, for example, I shaved off, I think, 25% of the access time in CodeGrader by simply putting in the session, caching on my side, the information about the assignment that we have last looked and that you have things like that. Just relying on the fact that, you know, when I get the session, then I get it all in a single blow, and I'm happy, essentially. Okay, so these things matter. Okay, but they are also out of scope, I guess. But now you know. And the beauty with the things like the session is that, yes, you pay one database access, but if I want to revoke your session, it's very easy. So if I want to essentially boot you out, it's very easy. No? And then you would have to authenticate again. Okay. So this is it. I wanted to discuss, maybe we will do it at the beginning the next time, but in the meantime, I want to tell you what, so that you can think about it. What I wanted to discuss is this. How do we do a better homework 3 application, a better local chat? I'm a bit confused, but essentially I wanted to ask you for your feedback. I was chatting with a student, I don't remember whom, last time, and we were a bit considering various things. There are various ways in which you may want to chat. That is, one paradigm is this, that these are public messages, and then if you click on one of these messages, then you can have a conversation thread on that message. So the thread is still public, but essentially it acts as the header of a thread. And once you click on it, you go into the thread. Okay, so this is essentially, we can say it's public and there are threads. Okay, I'm told, because I don't use it, that this is what Yik-Yak does. Okay, that in Yik-Yak, when you can say you can have various threads. You click on one and then you can contribute your messages. Okay, this is one way. Another way is, but better done, more similar to what we have done. Essentially, in which there are public messages, and then you can go to private. So you can essentially talk privately to another person. Okay, so you can click on it and tell you, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. Let's meet at 3 p.m. And you can say, yeah, okay, fine. And we talk one to the other. Another thing you can do is also that you touch on one of these things, and instead of private only, you have essentially a group. So for example, suppose I'm talking to him. Can I invite anybody else into the conversation? Maybe that would be too complicated and mind-blowing, okay, to implement. Because it essentially requires some notion of identity. Okay, so that there is this issue, essentially. There are at least these two choices, but maybe there are more. The other thing is, how do we make sure, from two things. First, that this is interesting to do. I mean, that you would have some chance of liking to use it. And then that this does not become too abusive, there are some things that really facilitate bullying or making fun of people. How do you keep the level of conversation a bit more decent here? Is there any correspondence between what you do in the organization of the medium? We can also put vote up and vote down buttons. That's quite easy to do, and these kind of things can be done. But essentially, how should this look like? Can you think about it a moment? What would you like? How would you like to talk to other people in a local setting? Would you like everything to be public? Would you like to have threaded conversations? Would you like it to be public at the beginning, but then when you click, you go private? Would you like to do what exactly? Okay.
Well, one of the things that certainly helps about this app is that, if you're going to insult someone, you have to understand that they are in your proximity. So, if they find out that it's you.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the things for which I put the locality values to be fairly small. I mean, not only for inputs, I thought actually for the other way around, for like, interest. But it doesn't work the way you say, because, you can always make fun of people who are not on the app, I guess. And so, it's, yeah.
I mean, one thing you might do is you might put in a bit of a filter. And for example, one of the things that I made sure is that I made sure to concatenate the messages. So if you just put a bunch of blank spaces, it'll number one concatenate it, and number two, it'll check to make sure that what you're submitting is not just an empty string.
Yeah, last time,
put in a word.
In my last class on web, I had I don't think she's here. Camilla Kodayari, she was doing a very interesting project in which essentially, when you posted something locally, it was distributed from some ways to other people that would look at it and upvote it and would make it to the destination only. I mean, she had a very interesting scheme that sort of made it work better. So think about how it should work, okay? And next time I want to dedicate maybe half an hour to various hypotheses, both how it should work and what are the possible choices. Maybe I should build a Google Doc on which we can all comment, but try not to write, long speeches. Try to write, we can do this or that choice, describe it clearly, and then we can add choices and we can say, try to discuss the merits, so we can converge, okay?
And this is starting Thursday?
Sorry?
This is starting Thursday?
These are the assignment. Yeah, let me see, according to how big the bug is, I may give you one more day till Friday, right? Because essentially I ate up one of your days if there is a server bug. Yeah, I'll need to go check it. Okay.
Assignment 3 was due on Thursday.
Sorry?
I assumed assignment 3 was due on Thursday.
Yes.
Okay. How do I just check?
Yes, it is due on Thursday. I may give an extension of 1 day if I essentially tap one day of your development,
Number two,
so I need to stop the Hangout. I'm on a Hangout and I don't find it. Where is it? Oh, here.